After an incredible blitzkrieg of a year one for Nintendo Switch, we had huge hopes for 2018. There would be tons more Nintendo releases, the promise of excellent third-party support, and a plethora of indie titles to fill the days, weeks, and months. But now with the last 12 behind us, was 2018 everything we wished it would be for Nintendo Switch? Gabe, I'm not so sure.
Yes, I mean, undeniably, a lot of really cool stuff happened throughout the year, but we'd be lying to ourselves if we didn't say that there were some things that kind of didn't quite meet the expectations that we had set for ourselves, and some of that might be on us, but there are a bunch of stuff to talk about here, and hopefully you guys agree with some. I know you guys agree with some because we see some of these in the comments so often, so we thought it'd finally time to talk about this in this little year and wrap-up we have going on.
Yeah, and after evaluating and kind of comparing 2017 to 2018, it's hard to match a launch year that includes your tentpole franchises, your top titles, and big changes for said series. But one thing we noticed that really kind of made this year feel a little lacking was the absence of a real big single-player experience from Nintendo. Now, granted, Smash Bros. Ultimate came through in the clutch by delivering an absolutely gargantuan World of Light mode that is super fun as a solo way to enjoy that game. But if we look around, I think because Pokemon wasn't brand new, it didn't kind of fit the bill. Mario Tennis Aces did have some solo content, but not a ton. You look at like Super Mario Party, you look at Kirby Star Allies, I don't feel like those really delivered massively on the single-player adventure side in the same way that Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, even Splatoon 2, given its creativity and diversity, did back in year one.
That seems to be a big glaring omission for the year. While third parties kind of made up for it, like I know we can mention, Octopath Traveler, that's a game that people really like, but that's not what we're talking about here. It is more along the lines of like Zelda and Mario, what we're talking about. They didn't have anything quite like that. And, that's kind of a bummer because I enjoy single player game. That's my preferred way of gaming. If I can avoid multiplayer, I will, unless it's a multiplayer focused game. So yeah, that was weird, right? To not have anything like that this year.
Yeah, and obviously you're going to have the ebb and flow of like, okay, we blew through Zelda and Mario 3D Adventures, so those are going to be absent for a little bit. But to me, it's like the emphasis on Splatoon 2 is kind of the missing link in year two. And I'm not saying we should have got another Splatoon game or something based on the Inklings, but that type of experience that felt truly massive. And I know that Smash Brothers does feel massive from a very multiplayer standpoint, and it's just a different beast altogether. But outside of that, even a game like Celeste, that I think is a phenomenal experience, it feels more bite-sized given just the nature of the gameplay, the style of the art, and the same could be said for plenty of other top-tiered titles that were still very fun and still very quality. But yeah, it's that missing of something. You see on the Sony side with their emphasis lately on like Horizon and God of War, and Nintendo did that in year one. They just didn't have anything in year two, and I'm wondering what fills the void for that in year three. Is Luigi's Mansion 3 going to be really massive? We don't think we're getting Metroid. Fire Emblem, how big will that feel? We'll have to wait and see. But the next thing that kind of bothered us about year two is that the longer and farther we go, the more ports start to feel like a bummer.
Yeah, and there's a lot. And it's not only a Nintendo problem. Third party continues to bring ports. We had Wolfenstein be one of our favorite games on Switch this year, but it is a port that you can get much cheaper on other platforms. So many of our favorite indies as well. One of them that kind of sticks out in our mind is Hollow Knight, and how, yes, it's amazing that it's on Switch, but the game's been available for some time on other platforms. You can find it cheaper. And yeah, as the newness of the Switch wears off, and I think it's fully worn off for me at this point, it's 2 years old. Like playing the games again on Switch isn't so cool to me anymore. If I can experience it for the first time on there, then heck yeah, I'm totally in. But too many ports, and they're going to start 2019 off with the biggest game being a port of a Wii U game in the form of New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. So I don't know if this problem goes away necessarily, but it is something worth noting.
Indeed. I hope that they are able to push forth and gain more third-party support, because I think that definitely helps fill the gaps. And we kind of expected year two to be where the third-party barrage really began, and it didn't quite materialize. Now, you could say that's because people were tepid about the start of the Switch, and it takes years for a game to, reach a point of release, or maybe it's that Nintendo will never be able to gain and garner the third-party support that we hope for. But that, to me, man, that might be the biggest low point, I guess, for this year, is that it just didn't come together. Wolfenstein 2 was a great port of an old game, which yay for that, but it's older. And outside of Panic Button, what was really being done? Outside of the Lego games, what was really being done? I loved having, Crash Bandicoot and Sane Trilogy on the Switch, but that's also old. It seems like that's going to be turned around in 2019, given the already announced Doom Eternal and Mortal Kombat 11 coming day and date as big, huge titles of not only graphical prowess, but of mature rating and universal praise. But yeah, third party didn't really come through, and that absence put so much emphasis on the Nintendo first-party titles when you're missing a big, massive single-player or big, massive experience in that sense. I think those holes become far more visible.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Diablo, Dragon Ball FighterZ, we can keep naming a bunch of ports that made their way over, so hopefully third-party...
Dark Souls?
Yeah, Dark Souls is another one. Yeah, there's too many to name, and yeah, that's a problem.
Indeed. And I think... this is more of a personal issue, but Super Mario Party was a game that could have really swung the pendulum in the favor of 2018 to make the year just feel a whole lot better. And I want to be clear, like with Smash Bros. Ultimate being the best that franchise has ever been, and maybe even the best Switch game all around, and Pokemon delivering a new art style that was just so cute and charming, Mario Tennis Aces being a competitive, fun multiplayer fest, Celeste being probably the best indie on the platform, there still was plenty to be excited about and still plenty to look back on and say, wow, there were great experiences. But Super Mario Party was the one that it was a surprise announcement at E3. It was coming out quickly. It promised to bring Mario Party back to form based on the early trailers and the idea of returning to individual players on a board. They had brought in this cool idea of dice blocks, and somehow it just felt botched. The first few rounds I played, very fun. I was into it. The minigames are quality, but the surrounding stuff, it's just not up to snuff. And I think that game in particular, as silly as it is to attribute so much emphasis to one title, that to me might be, like I said, the true pendulum swinger.
The boards were not as complex or big as we would have liked. The online multiplayer in that game is a joke. We have this rotating, very, very limited number of minigames that never change. It's silly. I was so disappointed by that. I wanted to like the game so much. And one of the unfortunate parts of being our age, like a little bit older, is like we don't get to see like our friends every single day, like in real life. So having the ability to play with someone that lives a little bit further, you and I could have played like so much of this, with Jake and, other people we know, if we were allowed to just have the experience online the way a lot of other experiences are just living in the year 2018. I don't think it's excusable to have another Mario Party game without the full experience being online. I know you want to preserve the local fun of it. I understand that, but just because it has online doesn't mean people won't get together. That's still going to be the best way to play. But to me, that was the biggest fault with Super Mario Party, the fact that they limited us so much with the online.
Well, I think the content, while they tried to pack in some new modes and they tried to emphasize co-op, quite literally with high fives and jovial reactions all around, new characters came aboard, minions and dice blocks and partner minigames. There were some good ideas there, and they did try, but it just, I don't know, at the end of the day, it still seems like a slight package, and it still seems like the boards are half-baked, and no word on DLC whatsoever, if it is to ever get any. We got no clue at this point. So it's disappointing that some things that could have been enhanced via future updates or content don't seem to be coming, and it really started off so exciting and kind of then fell to something that didn't even make our top 10. And I think at the beginning of the year, if you would have told me a new Super Mario Party that's coming to the console, it's promising to go back to form, it's bringing in all these new characters and elements and even some new modes, I would be so stoked. And instead, I'm just left sad, and I don't know if that franchise will ever recover because they don't seem to get what we're missing. They don't seem to understand what we want out of it, and you're right, the online is maybe the biggest flaw of all. Speaking of online, the Nintendo Switch Online service launched this year, and it is cheap. It provides NES games. It's had its ups and downs in a game like Smash Brothers, but all in all, it's kind of a ho-hum service. Now, I don't know that we should have expected anything super exciting from the online side of Nintendo's offering, but like themes, finally getting like Netflix and YouTube, maybe even some more multiplayer titles tied into the launch, and the idea of this NES catalog evolving beyond the original Nintendo. None of that materialized, and we're left with a service that I think is still very worth it for the price, and the family plan is great. I just got my brothers on board that recently. It's easy, it's fun, and it does allow us to all play for a couple bucks a month, but it wasn't anything to write home about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they could have done. The NES games just don't do it for me, and I don't even know if SNES games would do it for me. I think they got to do some really cool stuff with some other platforms, but we still had some issues with Smash Brothers when that launched, as far as like disconnections and things like that. And it's a bummer to be paying for this, even though it's not a lot, and have it still be like the same experience for the most part. So yeah, I have to agree with you there.
And I think we do know that what they could have done, it would be include those things, include Netflix, include YouTube, include themes, include the promise or the groundwork, the plan for more consoles and more of that nostalgia that goes beyond 3 NES games a month. I mean, Reggie talks about, we still have so many NES games. Goodness gracious. So we're going to be here till 2200 before we get to see N64 at that rate. What are they going to do? I don't know if it ever changes, but it was something that, it kind of just, it came and it went. And they are working on Smash Brothers. It does seem to be better at this point from an online standpoint. But yeah, not the greatest. Yeah. The last thing I'll mention here, and this isn't really a fault of 2018's releases, but it is sort of a strange oddity in Nintendo's plans. We didn't get really any dates for what they've announced. So you could say that the promise of year 3 is grand, and that this was a year that they needed to really sort of lay the foundation for what's coming in the future. But outside of Mario Bros. U Deluxe, we don't know nothing in terms of when these games are releasing. We still don't even have a year for Bayonetta 3 or Metroid Prime 4, and unfortunately, the latter is probably, for me, the most exciting game that's been announced but not released. Even with the lineup of Animal Crossing, Luigi's Mansion 3, Fire Emblem 3 Houses, and plenty more, we don't know when any of those are releasing. And I guess a roadmap would at least give us a timetable to say, okay, like this was a little bit slow in this area, but hey, we've got that big Fire Emblem coming, Gabe, in February, so it's okay. Or hey, we've got a Wild World of Animal Crossing coming in May, so hey, just be patient. We don't know, and with the ever-looming prospect of delays, it's a little dicey at this point.
One of the only saving graces as far as this goes is, at least recently, Nintendo has no problem saying, hey, this game's coming, and then it's like a month later. So that's the one thing that I'm looking forward to hopefully experiencing. But yeah, you're right. It's a bummer that we know no dates for anything except New Super Mario Bros. U. I mean, we have like tentative dates and tentative time periods of the year, but we need to nail down some of these things, especially because hopefully there is some unannounced stuff coming as well. So I want to see where these holes in the calendar would be.
Indeed. And all in all, again, it's really hard to complain about a year where you get the best Smash Brothers ever. You get Celeste, which is one of my favorite indies of all time. You get Mario Tennis Aces, which we had countless, grueling, intense battles. You get a Pokemon game that brought back so many fond memories. And then you do have some other titles like Kirby and Bayonetta. The ports that we kind of didn't talk about were quality. If you look at Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, it's a phenomenal game that many people experience for the first time. Wolfenstein 2 was executed marvelously by Panic Button. We got Warframe and Fortnite, and there were many areas that Nintendo excelled and succeeded. I think just for us specifically, it felt a little flat. After discussing all this, Gabe, how are you feeling? Was 2018 a bad year for Switch? Was it just too high of expectations? Where does it fall for you?
Yeah, I think the expectations were just too high, and I don't want to call it a bad year, just slightly underwhelming, I guess, because, Super Smash Brothers just overshadows so much, and they knocked it out of the park with that for the most part. I don't really have any issues with that game at all. I think it's phenomenal. It's just everything else. It's so hard to overlook, and maybe it's like nitpicking or like, we already said this, but maybe it's just our expectations being a little too high, but I can't help but feel just a little let down.
Yeah, I think that the highs were high. The emphasis on Smash Brothers was captivating, but also all-encompassing. And maybe during the year it sort of brushed over and massaged some of the missings. But for me, it was, I go back to our Game of the Year list, it was very hard to really find a bottom half of that 10. And to me, that should never be the case, right? It's an exciting platform with a lot of titles. And so personally for me, it was a down year. In spite of the success and the stellar nature of Smash, Celeste, and even the fun I had with Tennis Aces and Pokemon, outside of that, this is an entire platform we're talking about, not a 4-game console. And things like Super Mario Party that did let down, things like Kirby Star Allies that didn't grab me, a bunch of ports that I'd already played personally, and then I think there's an overabundance of game releases, but that almost just mucks up the waters too much, where it just feels like there's a constant flow of not that great. And maybe that plays a bit of a role as well of like, gosh, we're getting so many games and I don't really care to play any of them. Many are ports, many are coming from very small projects, and there are gems to be found, but it is overwhelming at times to see 30 games come out this week, and I don't care about any. So I will say that I loved the big ones, but it was a down year for me, and I do deem 2017 a superior year, and I'm hoping that 2019 can climb back to crushing my expectations. I'm keeping them more limited this year, Gabe. I'm keeping them more in check, but I do think the third-party support will finally be there. I know I say that every year, but it seems like it, and that will go a long way alongside a really exciting lineup of Nintendo titles. So 2018, bad for you, good for you, let down, or somewhere in between. Let us know in the comments down below. Make sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video and are pumped to see what 2019 brings. We have plenty of games to get excited about, and we're going to cover them right from the start in January. Until that time, everybody, have a fantastic day. Thanks so much for watching. For myself and Gabe, SwitchForce, out.